Welcome to the Power Airwaves, the Air Power Manufacturing Solutions podcast series where we talk about manufacturing issues that impact you. Hey, this is Travis Stirewalt with another episode of Power Airwaves. I have some really cool people with me today. We've actually tried to do this podcast 3 times. Third time's a charm, literally. We are actually here. And I didn't believe it until we actually had dinner last night before we prepped for this. So, some introductions. Zane, Abato, Global Finishing Solutions. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Some call it GFS and don't know what GFS means.
That's right.
You are the territory manager.
Correct.
Industrial sales, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, more on you later. Mark Richardson.
Yes, sir.
Fellow Air Power employee.
Been a while.
System specialist.
Yep.
You're based out of?
We're in Salem, Virginia, our branch in Salem.
Yep.
Been there for about 40 years.
40 years.
Yes.
So you're not quite in the original 10. You're probably in the original 25.
That's about right.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
40 years come 2023. So.
Okay.
Original 25, how many are there now?
I'm probably, Randy, short of Randy, I guess I'm probably the second oldest in the group.
Well,
Jai, you know what our total is now?
Like 130.
Jai, you know what our total is now?
As far as
employees?
What? Oh, no, I don't. Sorry.
We're
over 130.
Over 130.
Okay, so let's say 130, 140, and you were in the top 25.
Yeah.
The original 25.
That's probably right.
All right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
A lot of history here. All right, so today we're going to talk all things GFS. However, the most important thing we're going to talk about is ovens, booths, paint booths, and some things you need to be thinking about and properly analyzing or thinking about before you purchase one. And because you can get into a lot of trouble. And I guarantee both of these guys, as well as myself, we all have a multitude of examples we can use.
Sure.
But, okay, so first things first. This podcast, if you want to listen to this podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts, just look up Air Power Manufacturing Solutions or Air Power Airwaves. You can find all of that at airpowerairwaves.com. If you want to watch this and you're listening to it, you can go to YouTube, the Air Power YouTube channel. All things Air Power are at airpower-usa.com. If you have any questions throughout this entire podcast, you can call 1-800-334-1001 and just ask for help, and we'll be glad to give it to you. Okay, so let's talk about GFS. Let's get some background on GFS. Who is GFS? Did it start out as Global Finishing Solutions?
So no, we got our start back in 1975. And back then we were not GFS, we were JBI. And then in 1993, we were acquired by a company called the Current Group. And that really gave us a lot of financial stability and financial power to capture more of the market. So from 93 for the next decade, we made a lot of company acquisitions. In 2000, we purchased Blue Surf, which is an oven division or an oven line. So that's our burn-offs, cure ovens, drying enclosures. In 2003, we purchased the paint booth portions of Blowtherm, Devilibus, and Binks. And then in 2005, we rebranded and became Global Finishing.
Okay.
So it was a crazy 10 years, but it was because of those acquisitions that we are as prominent in the industry as we are today.
How early do you remember working with any of those companies?
I started in 83. 83, I was just getting my feet wet, but we had a sister company, Air Power, did at that time, and so I was exposed to JBI. I think probably somewhere along 87.
Okay.
And so I knew some of the old guys.
Was Dave still there?
Dave was there. His brother was there. So I got introduced to those guys, and they didn't have the line that they have now. They were really getting their feet wet in some of these different products.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been tied to them in some fashions since about '87.
Yeah.
No, in my powder coating background, I was tied into or very familiar with the blue surf side, with the burning off for hooks and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Saw that technology in a lot of places.
Well, if you look at pictures of where we were back in the JBI days, I mean, it was a little front office with a tiny little manufacturing plant in the back. And over the years, now we've got a 300,000 square foot facility for manufacturing. In 2006, we purchased or built a 100,000 square foot training facility. We call it the Center of Excellence, where we have 8 or 9 paint booths, ovens, dust collectors, and basically all of our equipment set up to take in distributors for technical. It's not a sales training; it's more technical training. And like on the control panels, there's all these little buttons for faults, and the teacher can flick on all these issues, and the technician has to get in there and troubleshoot, try to figure it out. So it's a state-of-the-art training facility. It's really cool. We got classrooms and
Where's this at?
it's at Osseo.
At Osseo,
Yeah, it's just it's right across the other side of the parking lot.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's really cool.
We I don't think we'd mentioned that before. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew where they are located.
Oh, yeah, Osseo, Wisconsin.
So Osseo, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So you're deploying about 200 people there, right?
400.
400.
Yep.
Wow.
Double.
Wow.
Yeah. Last
Growing.
one might have been 430. Yeah.
Wow.
So.
I mean, they're so we know you. I know you from the paint booths,
Mm-hmm.
ovens, filters.
Yep. Yeah.
What are there other markets that I'm not aware of that, or is this all?
So, global is broken into 4 different departments. We've got the aerospace division, which they deal in the monsters, right?
Yep.
The booths that are the size of airplane hangars. We're talking $15-20 million paint booths. Actually, I think still today the largest booth that is in the world is in Anchorage, Alaska, and it's a global finishing booth. It's got these massive pneumatic doors. It's just a beast. But that's all. A lot of that stuff is government, and they go. It's a whole different ball game. So they all go direct. It's
Imagine the temperature control for that room.
Oh, yeah. We put a monster in over in Raleigh area.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, we did. Or we're part of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we have the refinish department, which is exactly what it sounds like. They deal with auto and the refinish world. Once the car hits the street, it's all those guys. And then is the industrial, and which is what Air Power does. So that's, if it's not an airplane and it's not a car, it's industrial. So it's the most diverse group that we have. And then there's a parts department. So any part, any component, any widget or gadget that comes with all of our equipment, you can get it at GFS.
Good.
Filters, all lines. Yep.
When we were talking last night, there was a phrase that came up that's used called the GFS difference.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what that means.
So, unless it is a highly engineered, complex, let's call it system, conveyors, climate control, multi-stage washers, that sector, those customers know. There's only a couple manufacturers out there that can do that and do it well. But for the average guy, average customer that's looking for a standalone piece of equipment, a booth or an oven or what have you, looking to bring powder in-house, Mark and I over the years have been in front of many customers where you're sitting across the table, they got multiple quotes in front of them, they say, why GFS? I've got all these guys, I'm looking at apples to apples quotes, whether they are or they aren't, it's irrelevant, but they want to know why they should select GFS. And I think it's a great question. A lot of these guys who are going to purchase a paint booth, a standalone booth, if they buy it from the right manufacturer, it might be the only paint booth they buy, right? These things can last for 30 years in the field.
It'll last a career.
Right.
That's the way I stated it.
Exactly. So I think a lot of their concern up front is, well, what's going to happen after the sale, right? So you sell me on this product up front, I give you the purchase order, and then you dump it off on my dock, and I never hear from you again, because there's no next sale, right? So what's the saying? It takes you 10 years to build a reputation, it takes you a day to destroy it. GFS has been doing business for since '75. We've got a great reputation in the industry. Air Power's got a great reputation in the industry, and that comes from taking care of your customers after the sale.
Right.
We have an entire technical department, which I think is absolutely the best in the industry. I know Mark would agree to that. And their whole focus is after the sale support. And these guys are like wizards behind the curtain. They sit at a desk behind a screen, and a customer will call them, give them a partner or a project number and what their issue is, and they can troubleshoot it over the phone and figure out what the issue is. And they'll either fix it over the phone or instruct the customer how to fix it. And if it's too big and they can't do it, guys like Air Power will come out there, or GFS will come out there and help them out. So just the absolute backbone of GFS after the sale support. Those guys are just awesome. And I think we've got bench strength that is unparalleled in the industry. We've got 30, at last count, 30 designers and drafters. We've got 7 mechanical engineers, 3 electrical engineers. We've got 8 control programmers. We even have a committee member of the NFPA that is employed at GFS. Codes and standards are always changing, and you got to stay, especially if you go up to Canada where they change like every week. But you got to stay on top of that stuff to make sure the customer knows that when they get a piece of equipment, it meets all national codes.
On top of that, in PE stamp drawings. You got 2 or 3 licensed guys in every state of the union that can provide PE stamp drawings for that piece of equipment.
Absolutely.
Which is very important.
Yep.
Yeah, which is becoming more and more prevalent these days.
Yep.
Tremendous bench strength. We've got installation crews all over the country. We've got a dozen startup technicians. We've got project managers. I mean, GFS has a wealth of experience. And when I say experience, there's a difference between knowledge and experience. I can know everything, all the ins and outs of our equipment at Paint Booth, and know all the features and benefits and how to sell it and how it's going to help. But knowledge is not experience. And I remember my very first day, I go to our Monday morning meeting, and it's your typical, you go around the room, everybody introduces themselves, their name, what they do for the company, how long they've been with the company. And it was like 12 years, 17 years, 25 years, 15 years, 30 years. I mean, everybody, and those same people are still at GFS today. So when we said over 400 employees, it's not just 400 employees, but a large majority of the individuals at GFS have been around for a very long time. Guys like Dave Rowland, who I know you rely on tremendously. Those guys, they don't get stumped. They know the answers to everything. They've been around the block. They've seen what works, what doesn't work. And that stuff doesn't come from knowledge, it comes from experience. And I think that's another thing that just really separates us from our competition, is what we can bring to the table from an experience level.
Yeah, and as a distributor, those assets are very important to us. And we have to offer assurances when we go out for a sales call and be confident that we can give them the kind of support they want.
Yep.
So if we have the Dave Rollins of the world, Ben Thompson of the world, who's in Tech Assist, how many Tech Assist guys do you have? 6 or so?
Yeah, 6 or 7.
So if we have it with the 800 number, and to repeat what Zane said, the 800 number is right on the booth, it's right on the oven. So if they have a problem, the customer has a problem, we have this dual level service. They can call Air Power, of course.
Yep.
But they can also call the 800 number, and we might not be right there on the spot. They can pick up the 800 number, give them a serial number. They've got 6 Tech Assists on the phone all day long, every 5 days a week, that the customer can call and maybe get a solution to the problem.
Sure.
Yeah, there's another thing that came out when we were talking is that you guys sell 100% through distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you might know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
When you're comfortable for a customer to be able to call direct to GFS
Yep.
to find a solution,
Sure.
and you're not worried about something being taken away from behind your back.
That's right.
It's a big trust factor, in my opinion.
It is, and because we are 100% through our distribution, and we stand behind that, we wouldn't be 100% through distribution very long if we didn't stand behind that.
Correct.
It only takes one
Correct.
bridge to burn, and it's hard to gain that trust back. So, and there's that level of trust there for sure.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. We mentioned this podcast had been rescheduled 3 times.
Over 2
Third
years.
time's a charm. And we talked about, the bulk impact on that. Both times that we tried to reschedule was COVID. This question has come up on most podcasts in the last couple of years coming out of COVID. How did COVID affect GFS? We know how, we've talked about it on podcasts, how it affected us. My interview with Dan Seneff, both mid-COVID and then following up this last year, we had another one. How did you guys fare? What was the impact, the overall impact?
So we're still going through it. Everybody is with supply chain issues, and business is difficult. It's hard to keep up with rapid changing prices, and we manufacture tremendous amount in-house, everything from lights to control panels. But there are certain components, obviously, especially electrical components, that we don't manufacture, and we're kind of at the mercy of our suppliers. Nobody wants to hear that, but it is true. But in situations like a global pandemic, where it's hard to look at the upside, I truly believe that great companies rise to the challenge. And you hear a lot of stories about how, look at these publicly traded companies, how well some of them did during the pandemic. And it was because they didn't sit back and go, well, this is how we've done business since the beginning of time, we're not going to change. The companies that did that either are in bad shape right now or they're no longer around. We've seen a handful of them that have disappeared in this industry. When you have an interesting situation like a COVID, it gives you a chance to evolve as a company. It takes some investment, and we've done that. When finding qualified shop guys was hard, we invested in a Salvagnini machine, which took the place of 30 guys, and it just lights out 7 days a week, pumps out sheet metal panels. It also increased tremendous human error, so the precision is much higher, the speed is much higher. So that machine was purchased right at the beginning of COVID, and it's fully operational today. We had some, let's call it, longer than average submittal time process. We knew this was a pain point for us, and we had to address it for our distributors. A lot of the, once a customer puts a purchase order in, they expect things to move at a steady clip. So we invested in a software platform, we call it Model Builder, that allows us to import all the information of the paint booth, and it can pump out within 15 seconds a 3D rendering of the booth, full schematics, electrical schematics, and full submittal in 15-20 seconds. So, or let's call it 15-20 minutes. It takes some time to enter the information in. So you go from 40-50 hours down to 15 or 20 minutes. That's a tremendous benefit to our distributors and our customers on speed of getting those done.
What is that going to do for you as far as, let's look at it this way. You can have up to 500 hours on a big oven, right, of engineering time.
Or a multi-stage washer or something like that.
Washer.
Sure. Yeah.
So, that will help keep that price either level or even drop the price.
Sure. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Right? To be more competitive in the market, more accurate.
Yep.
And man hours are expensive.
Right.
So if we can shave 400 plus hours off of a drafter designer, and letting him get doing things like product development, and take time away from just plugging panels in and where bolts go, and their time can be useful in other ways. So this is was a pretty big win for us.
So we've talked about the production side, impacts on your engineering, production, drafting, and I want to talk to Mark for a second about you've always been a champion within our organization for working with GFS, and it's to the fact of, or to the point of like almost a stalwart, like you're that committed to that product line.
Yep.
And it's admirable, to say the least. What I want to know from you and your perspective is, why do we have such a strong relationship with GFS?
Well, from my perspective, and I think from a lot of others here in the organization, I mean, I think we share the same values. The bottom line is, I mean, customers are looking for things like, look for quality, look for performance, and they're looking for support. That's about, that's big to the customer. I can go in and see a customer with 100% confidence that we're going to get that from GFS. Now, granted, building that relationship with Global has not been challenging, but it did take a lot of time to find out what Global was all about, understanding what their capabilities were, and then them understanding us as a distributor. We've been working together for how long now?
8 years.
And we've done a good job of getting to where we are right now. So, again, I, as a specialist and a salesperson, can walk into the customer and give him 100% assurances of what I think he's looking for, and not be worried about whether we can support it or not. I mean, we talked a little bit about the component, about your abilities, but we didn't talk about the componentry of your booth, which kind of stands out a little bit to me.
Talk about it.
Okay, well, let's talk about fans. I mean, it may be a simple topic, but it's really not. It's something that's used all day long, 7 days a week in some cases, 2 shifts a day. Mm-hmm. Fans are big. Now, that's a buyout item for you, but you're using air vent, you're using Green Heck,
Yep.
top of the line.
We also manufacture our own fans depending on
that's right, depending on the application,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they'll take a special look at those fans and they understand what the need is, and what the performance has to be for those fans. We'll often talk about cheating the air. Some of the competitors like to cheat air.
Mm-hmm.
Global doesn't do that. They'll look at the full throat of an exhaust port, if you will. In other words, the width times the height, and they give you the full value of what you deserve when it comes to airflow. Other companies, company X, Y, or Z, they'll cheat the front of the booth, or they'll place the input plenum in the wrong place, and they'll try to cheat the air to keep that fan size down, still be in compliance. But that in the long run, that hurts the customer.
Well, I'll just say to barely be in compliance.
Yeah, that's right.
In the best conditions.
Maybe in compliance without filters in the wall.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I have the distinct pleasure of probably reading more booth airflow than anyone else in this organization.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
so many booths are starving for air.
And with a new booth, with the filters in place, you might get a reading initially, first day, on a new booth with competitors' equipment. But after you use for about 3 days, suddenly they have, instead of 100 feet a minute, they have 50 feet a minute.
Right. Yeah.
And
Well, because they didn't have adequate airflow, they throw something like a really light fiberglass filter up there.
Absolutely.
And it's pulling paint straight through it. Before too long, you got the fan coated, the stacks coated, airflow drops to below requirements, and then they're going, what's wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
this is brand new, right?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, the fans are critical. The controls. Talk about your componentry and your controls. Using Allen Bradley. And the touchscreens are Siemens.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much standard. Now, if you want something special, maybe a cost, because that is standard for Global, and it's typically fine with most customers. Mm-hmm. They build their own lights, LED lamps. And, quite honestly, if you look at their workmanship, you talk about the robustness of their equipment, And you could take and I could give you an example, and I will. With larger booths, Global uses I-beam construction, pre-drilled I-beams that the panels bolt to horizontally, and we come across the top of that booth and connect those two uprights every 10 feet, and sometimes less, depending on what's required. So their booth is able to support an air makeup. We've been in so many places. I was in one yesterday. The booth collapsed without an air makeup on it over time. Now, there's something wrong with that, right? But what they do in a lot of cases, some of these other manufacturers will sandwich 2 or 3 pieces of sheet metal together as a rib, if you will, every 10 feet. You've seen it.
Thinking that'll be the support.
That is the support. And then the doors sag after about a month. The booth is not up to industrial standards. It's just not. People think they're saving money sometimes, and they are initially, but it costs them in the long haul for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
So I don't have no problem with Global. I mean, never have.
Your doors sagging, things like that, they always lead to other issues.
Right.
It's like a daisy chain of effect, loss of heat, loss of air from the oven, for instance, So you had touched on several products. I want to make sure that we talk about these really quick. You mentioned washers.
Yep.
And we obviously knew about the ovens and the booths, and then you touched on washers. So are those the 3 key?
No, so we manufacture everything in the finishing line, in the finishing system, or the process. So everything from surface prep, so multi-stage parts washers, blast enclosures, dry off ovens, cure ovens, burn offs, liquid booths and all different airflows, powder booths and all different airflows, multiple different powder, whether it's a collector or a multi-stage filter. We do dust collectors, paint storage rooms, you name it, we do it in the finishing system.
Let's go down through you did talk about the bread and the butter a little bit, the ovens and the paint booths.
Sure.
But let's go through the different. So actually, we did talk about this quite a bit, and you just covered these. Do you want to get in depth with any of these?
I mean, if
these
you have
categories,
this could turn into a long podcast of technical conversation. So I don't know if we necessarily need to do that, but
I'll tell you what. Let's do this for now. Let's talk about ovens because I'm a big sticker on ovens.
Yes, you are.
Good even heat distribution is important. Again, offering assurances to the customer that we can maintain plus or minus 10 degrees on a typical oven, and we can get down to about 5 degrees if they want to put enough air turns in that oven.
I want to do this. I want to talk about the ovens. I want to get into that in depth, and then after that, I want to talk about washers.
Okay, sure.
We talked about booths a little bit, and the number one issue is the starvation of air.
Sure.
Just not being able to get that airflow in there, enough air movement, and that leads to a lot of other problems. Now we're going to talk about ovens, and then I want to talk about washers.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So there are a lot of manufacturers of ovens out there, and there are some good ones. I mean, I could name them, but GFS, again, we're partnered with them for a lot of reasons. And offering assurances is the big thing for Air Power. Of course, we're basically an integrator. Once we get that from Global, we're the integrators, and we have to make guarantees. Now, Global will back our guarantees, okay? And they offer a certain amount of performance level, and they have to be able to offer that based on the way they design their ovens. So we talk about ovens, proper ductwork, distribution ductwork inside the oven, proper insulation, proper placement of the return duct, and all those things collectively give you that plus or minus 10 degrees anywhere in the oven at all times. We guarantee that, and I can go in and guarantee that, and I can get that from Global. So, I mean, we can talk about the way they do things, but honestly, if I can assure a customer that he has a plus or minus 10 degrees anywhere in that oven, that's pretty good.
And that's huge. You look at my background, if you didn't know, prior to this company was powder coating for a decade in powder, and I ran a data pack all the time, trying to make sure the customers' parts were cured. And holy moly, the number of just horrific data packs that I did. There's a lot of user error where people think that an oven for curing powder is like an easy bake oven.
Yeah.
Right. Open the doors, push the parts in, shut the doors, and set the timer like you're baking cookies.
Yeah.
And it's not. There's a lot of factors. The weight, the mass of the product. Are you steel or aluminum?
Very good point.
Oh, yeah.
Good point. You want to address that?
Yeah, you hit on that. So, there in this industry, paint booths and ovens, and Mark already touched on it, there's a lot of ways to hit the qualifications and skate by. And if you're not looking at throughput or efficiencies, you can manufacture this type of equipment for less. And for ovens specifically, if you have an undersized burner and not enough air changes, an empty oven could still read plus or minus 10 to 25 empty, and hits all the balance, you're good. But then you put 10,000 pounds of steel in there,
big heat sink.
Right.
Yeah.
And now it takes an hour and a half for that part to get up to temperature, another 30 minutes after that to cure. The customer's upset that this is taking me 2 hours when my old oven I could do it in 45 minutes. Well, you went cheap and you got an inferior product, and this is the result. So,
or hey, let's just put the thermocouple closer to the heat source.
Right, right at the duct.
So the front of I could think of a couple examples right away of things that went awry where the temperature swing in the oven was about 70 degrees difference.
Oh yeah,
70 to 100 degrees difference.
I've seen it.
And from the top to the bottom, front to back. But then you go in there and you start looking at the ductwork, and it was just tubes that ran down and then shot the air at the front door or the double doors of the oven that were offset, and heat was escaping, but the doors were so hot you couldn't open them.
Right.
But it was 70 degrees lower towards the back of the booth, near where the burner is.
Right.
It's like
There's
just so many just crazy things that I've seen over the years.
It's more than just a hot box, because what happens when you build a hot box, you can get variation in temperatures.
Oh yeah.
But that's what heat distribution is all about. The big thing is on the front side of any project, whether it's a spray booth or whether it's an oven or whatever, we like to understand the process. As Zane pointed out, we want to know, okay, how much mass or how much steel is worst case scenario. We want to make sure that we size the burner properly so that you can get the production that you need. Because if we undersize the burner, you've gone from what we typically like to say is 30. A full cycle is from the time I open the doors, I pull the part out, I put new parts in, I close the doors, it ramps up, the parts come up to temperature, and then we hold that temperature for about 10 minutes on average. That's a full cycle. Well, that impacts your production.
Correct.
So we want to size the oven proper, if you will, to accommodate enough parts to get somewhere around 8 cycles a day.
Sure.
That's what we look at. But I have to have the proper burner to accommodate that requirement.
Well, you could just keep the burner the same size and add 4 panels because we have a longer pole that needs to go in.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. But we're real careful with that.
But don't change any of the ductwork or just give me some panels.
But I'll promise you that we, and I say we being our specialist and global, they want that information before we ever get started with the proposal. We're not just throw a number out there. We're going to find out a lot about what you do day to day.
Sure. Yep.
For sure.
And that can be frustrating sometimes for certain guys. Why do you need all this information?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned shortcuts of quality with using stiffeners instead of I-beams, or cheating on the airflow, or undersized burners, or whatever, what have you. We're willing to hear the arguments, but it all comes back to experience that we have from past projects where we know what works, we know what doesn't work, we know what's going to make the customer happy in the end and what's going to upset them in the end. And sometimes you just got to dig your heels in and stick to your guns. And
a good example of that, and what Global does, as opposed to most powder booth, kind of jump there for just a second, powder booth where we have cartridge collection, is they'll oversize the collectors a little bit to accommodate a airflow they feel like you get in trouble on, as opposed to some manufacturers who will put a little blind on the left, a little blind on the right, and drop the height down a little bit. Once you got the booth, you got smaller collectors. Well, you've got dead space in there. But what Global will do is give you the full throat, if you will, airflow, left to right, floor to ceiling, and they give you a VFD, okay, to turn it up and down to make sure you get your maximum transfer efficiency, but still give you the proper airflow.
Okay.
It's a great feature, and most people won't offer that. And there might be a few dollars off, but quite honestly, apples to apples, Global's as competitive as anybody out there. Apples to apples.
I agree.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about washers a little bit. Washers in all industries, as far as we're concerned, like when we're talking about automotive or aerospace, marine, what have you, general industry. The washers is there to make sure that the paint gets good adhesion without any debris in between the paint or the powder and the substrate. In certain cases, that would be a basic wash. In certain cases, you go to multiple stages. Multiple stages allow you adhesion promoters,
Correct.
Rust preventative, and in some cases, when you get to the multiple, you're getting out 5, 7, 9 in some cases, to where you're getting into AMA 2605. If you're coating facade for a skyscraper, you're not going to be repainting that. It's got to have something on there that's going to last. So you get into your AMA 2605s, and washing is super critical. Coming from a powder coating background, washing is everything.
If you attend a PCI or any sort of powder coating course, they beat on two things: surface prep and grounding. And surface prep is like 90%. So, and you hit on it. If you don't need to have an enhanced coating, whether it's corrosion resistance or chemical resistance, and then a blast will work for you. But if you do need to take that next step, then a wash would be required.
Yep. As simple as a phosphate,
right?
Iron phosphate, zinc phosphate, all the way up to the chromate. Now there's non-chromate type, But even in other worlds, you're talking about the plating world, plating with the dip processes and the barrel processes or whatever. Even for them, man, cleaning is like, it's the fundamental basic for building a perfect finish. And it's skipped.
Very well said.
It's skipped so much in our industry.
Yeah.
Again, well said. And just a couple months ago,
Is it clean?
Yeah.
Okay, let's spray it.
I was in a facility, and they were it was giant pieces of metal. And as they were coming out of the oven, generally on the same side, you had some discoloration and some kind of bubbling, and it just didn't look good. But the rest was good. And so we walked through the whole line, and it's like you said, it's just an afterthought sometimes, the surface prep. People don't realize that there's oils on this material as it comes in, and who knows how it was shipped and who's touched it with their hands, and all this stuff plays a role. It's not just how well it was coated and how efficient is your oven. and I was watching a guy blast just a power washer at these parts. And as they come out of the wash, I said, "You want to see what your problem is? Touch right where you're having issues." And he looked at it and touched it. It was bone dry. He was missing that part every single time.
Yep.
Human error. And that's exactly where he's having his problem every single time. Because it's for some reason,
Yeah, that's
surface
impingement. Typically
prep.
with a wand, it could impingement one place and not another.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's other issues also, because
Yeah.
if you look at, and I remember, what was it, 2008, 9, somewhere around there. There was I believe that was the era where there was a huge steel crunch, and companies were importing
Right.
steel from like Turkey
Yeah.
that had like a whale fat on it
Yeah.
to protect it. I kid you not. We had a customer, Eddie Rhodes and I had a customer in East Tennessee that called us and was like, "Hey man, your white powder," because I was selling the powder at the time, is discoloring. It's like doing this weird thing on all of our steel. Well, they built these big, heavy square stock steel, super heavy weightlifting, for gyms,
Yeah.
weightlifting systems for gyms. And
Racks and stuff.
so we went over there. It's a big batch system. They were doing a good job with everything. They were actually doing a good job with the way that they sprayed these off. But you could spray them off with this hot water with the chemistry in it, the iron phosphate in it.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, when they put it in the dry off oven, it's a lower temp. They were just a quicker hit, right? Just to dry it off. They'd pull it out, and they would go into the powder coating booth, let it cool down, and then they would shoot it cold or just basic warm. They would shoot it, and they would put it in the oven, and when it came out, it would have that nastiness to it. I'm like, all right, there's something in the steel. So we took one and put it in through the process,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up going from the oven to a full cure in the oven with just a pressure washed, pre-treated part. Took it back out and did wipes on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were wiping up all this impinged garbage that was just pushing out
From the heat.
I think it took 4 cycles of the oven baking this thing, getting it out and pressure washing and wiping it down again till we couldn't wipe any more off. It was 4 cycles until then we went in to go powder. After another complete wash cycle, a little bit of dry off, went into powder. It was perfect.
And that's why we depend a lot on the chemical companies.
Yep.
Okay, what do you recommend? You're looking at the steel, and we put that burden on them because we're going to build something around all that.
Correct.
Right. We're going to build something around your parameter.
And that's why we don't
Yeah.
get involved with the washers as much.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a whole lot to it.
It's a lot to it. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility.
All right. Well, guys, this has been a fantastic podcast.
Thank you for
I
having
think we have a couple other projects in mind that we're going to look at to do a little conversations about, but I think we'll save that for another round. And Zane,
Thank you.
thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much for your time, and thank you
Absolutely.
for your partnership with Air Power.
Thank you.
Mark, I'm so happy to finally get you in the studio
Next time
after
you have to pay.
begging for 2 years. I'm glad that COVID released you.
Yeah.
You are okay.
Hey, and all the worry was for nothing. It got COVID anyway.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm going to close this podcast out with the real quick. If you have any questions, 1-800-334-1001. Just ask for help. Just ask whatever your question is to whoever answers. We'll get you what you need. airpower-usa.com for all things Air Power, including our online store, our online web store. And then airpowerairwaves.com for this podcast, and airpowerlive.com for all the videos you could possibly imagine on everything that we do. And I'm going to close this podcast out the way I always do by saying, manufacture it a great day.
Thank you for joining the Air Power Airwaves podcast. Air Power Airwaves is a production of Air Power Inc. and Air Power Live Studios and is hosted by Travis Stirewalt. For more information, please visit airpowerairwaves.com. For more information on all of our products, brands, and manufacturing solutions, please visit airpower-usa.com. If you have any questions or need product support, please contact Air Power at 1-800-334-1001.